Hello everyone and welcome back. As we start this assignment demonstration video, it's important to understand that we need a few things. As I mentioned in the preview, we're definitely going to need the reference sheet and the example, and we're also going to need our 1/4 inch plans. So as I mentioned, I'll be using this so that it reads a little better for the video, but we're going to start with placing this and understanding the ideas of cross-section. As we do that, I want to just remind you one other thing, that we will be working with a 1/4 inch scale again, so we don't need the 1/8 inch side at all, just the 1/4 inch, so that'll be helpful. And then the triangles that you'll need, I would suggest using the 45-degree triangle for most of your work. If you do, you could get easily confused with some of the angles that are required if you use this 60, 30, 90 degree triangle. So I'm going to suggest set that aside and use only the 45-degree triangle. Now, I'm going to use my regular triangle and it's already set at 45. So in so doing, those in your parallel are what you're going to be required in terms of tools. Of course, in terms of the materials, you'll need, some drafting tape. You'll need pencil and eraser, and probably not so much in terms of the templates this time, but we'll see as we get a little deeper in. Okay, so those are the materials. You've worked with them before. Hopefully you're becoming pretty familiar with them. All right, so as we think about the ideas of cutting a cross section, I'm going to make an adjustment to how we've been doing things. And so this is an important point to make, that we are going to be cutting our cross section in such a way as that we need to reverse or flip the plan to be upside down to its previous orientation. So please make a note that you will be drawing with the washroom up here on the upper right and the solarium down here on the lower left. Make sure that you have it in that orientation or your section's going to be messed up. So let's go ahead and start. As always, we want to make sure that we square up the drawing. So take a few minutes now and make sure that the drawing and the is square to your parallel. And because I made a copy here, and the copy machine isn't a perfect copy, I actually have to make some minor adjustments, and that'll be adequate for what we're doing. But just understand that, I think I mentioned it in previous videos, that just because you make a copy of something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an exact copy. And so you want to be a little bit cautious, especially with copy machines, because they tend to stretch and distort just ever so little bit on the original. So the copy is going to be a little off. All right, so I've squared it up. We're ready to go. Let's go ahead and get our sheet of vellum. Remember, we are orienting ourselves in landscape this time. Not vertical, but horizontal. Horizontal landscape is how we're going to call it. Okay, so based on that, let's go ahead and square that sheet up too. And for this exercise, I'm pretty much putting the drawing in the middle. In fact, I'm going to make a minor adjustment here because I've just noticed that in the video alignment, it's a little bit off. So I'm going to scoot it over a couple more inches so that it lines up just a bit better. And we'll do that one more time. And then we'll place our vellum on top. Yeah, it's pretty good. So we're going to say that will work. Okay, so now placing our vellum, I'm going to put this on the bottom piece. It's got a couple little pieces of irregularity, and I'm going to square that up. Now it's pretty much in the center. I think we should be okay. And we're going to go ahead and tape down 4 corners on that. Yep, we're good. All right, now, okay, so remember that we're going to be using the plan, and the good thing about using this vellum the way we're doing it is the goal is to be able to have the section relate very directly to the floor plan that's down below this. It isn't a tracing job, but there is some very good ways of orienting ourselves and finding placement of the built environment here by using the plan right underneath. Now, there is a process by which you could have the plan over to one side and you could measure and draw and measure and draw. But if you've done the drawing correctly, then this drawing is very valid as a tool for drawing your building elements. Now, since we've got it all taped down here, one of the things I want you to think about is how the cross-section gets cut. We've talked about this in previous class sessions, but only a little bit. So let's talk about it a little bit more now. In our example, we're going to be cutting a cross-section right through here, and we're going to take this part, we're going to cut through the building vertically and remove this part. So what's left over, we're looking this way at what's remaining in an upright kind of fashion or upright orientation. So where we cut the cross section is kind of important. Now, in this particular case, we're going to be cutting through the solarium, but it's not a good idea to cut through the window. So we're going to be just this side of the window. So if I was to cut or show where that cut section is going, it's going right there. That means it's not cutting through a window, because windows and doors give you a funny cross-sectional relationship. There's enough going on in this solarium that it'll hold its own, and there's some important features that we want to show in this section. So we're gonna cut through that, and it'll make sense as we proceed. But that's where the cut is. So we're taking this portion out, and it's like it's disappeared, and now this part is being oriented this way. So the roof is here, the walls are here, and the floor is down below. So our goal is to cut this cross section using the information on the plan. And with the plan taped down, we can take it directly off the plan. So that's number one. There is a direct relationship between the plan and the section we're going to draw. That's why I said last week we need this drawing. So we've got it taped down. We're going to use it. We're oriented correctly. Now, let's talk about one other aspect of this thing. Last week, when we did the floor plan, our very first activity was to figure out the boundaries of that floor plan. We figured out the width, and we figured out the height, or the other directional dimension, and we used that to create an enclosure, the basic form of the plan. Well, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to try to use the floor plan and some information we have on this sheet to get us to create a basic enclosure. And the reason that's important is that means our drawing is confined to just that area. We're not wandering the sheet looking for where we're going to put the information. It's right in that basic form. So in this first video, we're going to spend a few minutes to try to find what that form is and how to make it. And with that, we'll be using our reference sheet here, and we'll be using the floor plan down below. So one of the things that I want to point out is that the floor plan helps us, and I'm going to repeat this again, the floor plan helps us figure out where things are oriented in the section based on the plan. So placement lengthwise or in latitude is going to occur based upon the orientation of the plan. But the heights will all be given right here. So we're going to go back and forth. So just understand that's how we're set up for this assignment. When we do real projects, we have all that stuff kind of already in our design head. But for this assignment, it works best this way. Okay, so let's start with remembering that, as mentioned in the very first line, that our wall thicknesses are 6 inches for exterior and 4 inches thick for interior walls, just like last week. The rules are not changing. Okay, there are some thicknesses. The ground floor and the second floor have a nominal floor thickness of 12 inches, and that the ceiling roof assembly, which is this guy right here, that's only 6. So it could be a little bit more, but for this schematic design, it's quite adequate to call it 6. So we got 6 on the outside, 4 on the inside, 12 inches for a floor, and 6 inches for the roof ceiling. Okay, so those are some things that are already on the sheet. Okay, we'll come back in just a minute. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the left and right boundaries of the section. So what we want to do is we want to know where this is and where this is. Well, guess what? They're already on the plan. So we're just going to mark them, and we're going to draw them. Now, I drew this light line across here as a reference point. We'll take that off in a minute, but just understand, again, our cross section is if we cut this building and remove this and are looking at the three-dimensional form, and what's left over is vertical and width and height. Okay, and that's what our section is showing in an orthographic projection. Okay, so based on that, all I have to do now is provide a vertical line at the outside and the inside wall thickness. Just like that. No more, no less. Just draw this wall line and this wall line. Okay, so just the thickness, 6 inches at 1/4 inch. Do the same thing on the other side. And we're not worried about how high it is yet. We'll trim it and make it work in just a minute. Guess what? Nothing of significance is happening outside of where my hands are. So that's the width. We found it by using the existing plan. We just drew right over it lightly because this is a block out. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me the boundaries on the right and the boundaries on the left. Okay, so we have identified the boundary walls left and right. Now we're going to put a floor across this thing. Now, in order to do the floor, we need to have a base or a what we call the finished floor height. So I'm going to come over here, maybe an inch or so above the plan edge, and I'm just going to put a horizontal line across. Now, that horizontal line should get us, I'm going to bring it down just a bit. I think it'll help me out later because I have to keep the video, all this stuff in view. I'm going to actually line it up with this edge of the solarium. Okay, so took my cross-section cut out. It's no longer part of what I need. I'm going to need a piece of tape here. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this line that I just drew goes from one side of the building all the way over to the other. So one boundary to the other. That's called the finish floor for this cross section. So what I want you to do is now trim the line so that it falls between this line and this line. Okay. And we're going to give it a thickness of 12 inches, which is at this scale is 1/4 inch. So we're going to measure this horizontally. Now it's a little bit fussy because it's falling on a funny place on my plan, but I just have to ignore that because it's okay. I know where I'm going with it. So what I've got is this wall on the right side. I got the wall on the left side. Now I have a floor. On the top of that floor, I want you to make that line a little heavier. Okay, and then I want you to write the word or the letters FF on top of it. So I'm going to do that right now, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so that line's pretty easy to see there. I'm going to write FF in the corner. FF means finish floor. What that means is that I'm not going to get confused by the bottom of the floor section. My finish floor is always going to be measured from that location. And if you look here, there's a lot of terms saying above finish floor. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. And we want to mark that right now. Okay, so we have our floor height, we have our floor thickness, we have our walls on each side. So now we have to put a lid on this, and that will help us to create the form. What we've done is this piece, this piece, this piece, now we're going to do this piece. Okay? So we need to now come over to our reference plan and understand a few things. So I'm going to take us over to this piece right here, which talks about building heights. What we want to know is that the second floor is 9 feet above finished floor, and so we need to put a horizontal line at 9 feet. So I'm going to come over here and mark it. Here's 0, 8, 9 goes right here. I'm going to draw a line across lightly. That's the floor height. Okay, so we mark the floor height, and because it's a floor, it has the same thickness as this one does here. So below that line, 1 foot down, or 1 foot and a quarter inch, we're going to provide another line, but make it kind of light. Again, I want to keep the top line a little bit easier to recognize than the full thickness line. And you'll see some benefits to that a bit. Keeping it light, go ahead and draw it across. All right. So now what we've done is we've shown the ground floor, the left and right wall, and the second floor. Now, the second floor is going to get trimmed up a little bit here later, but let's not worry about it. We're just finding heights. All right, so based on that, we now know that we have found the second floor. Now, we need to find the second floor plate. Now, what is a plate? A plate is a framing member in wood construction, which represents the top or bottom of a wall. So, a bottom plate goes at the floor line. We're not worried about that right now. The top plate goes at the top of the wall. So that top plate, they say, in this information right here in the third line down, says second floor plate, 4 foot above finish floor. That's the second floor, finish floor. So on top of the second line right here, measure up 4 feet. Okay. Now, just mark the top of walls. Don't go all the way across on this one. So where that 4 foot line is, mark it on both walls. All right, so repeating, side walls done, floor done with finished floor listed, second floor done with the top of that being the finished floor. So I'm going to make that a little darker here just so you can see it a little better. Okay, then that's the second floor, finished floor. So I put a little FF there too, just to keep myself, so I remember. All right, now, last thing we just did was we found the plate of this hot wall and this wall. And that's where the roof connects in at the plate. So that's this point right here where the wall stops and the roof begins. So you have a little line here, horizontal line, a little horizontal line there. Now, you have found the beginning place for the roof to extend up. And that roof, for all intents and purposes, you see on your little diagram here, there's a reference. It says 1 and 1. That means that it is for every 1 foot of horizontal, it goes up 1 foot of vertical. Okay, so that's going to determine the slope. 1 to 1 is a 45-degree angle. That's why I suggested using the 45-degree triangle so you can find that easily. Now, what we're going to do though is we're going to go to the inside wall, not the outside, but we're going to go to the inside wall where we put that little horizontal line, and we're going to draw just past the middle a single line. Okay? And we're going to do the same thing on the other side, the opposite side. We're going to come in from this side, not this one, but this side, right at that point where the horizontal line meets the wall. And we're going to shoot a line up at a 45-degree angle, and we're going to stop it when it intersects the other roof line. Okay? So, what that means is that we have walls, we have a top plate, our roof is at 45 degrees, and the other roof's at 45 degrees. And we set that by having the triangle to do that. We haven't put the thickness in, we'll do that next. But, so now the basic shape of this house is coming together. We're starting to see it. How thick is the roof? We talked about that a couple of minutes ago. That's going to be 6 inches. So I'm just going to mark that. Use this part of the scale, make it a little easier. Okay, now go from the top where it intersects down to the bottom here. Okay, and you're going to go by it just a little bit. You'll see what happens in a minute. All right, so 6 inches. Remember to measure perpendicular to the angle. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to have it be off at some angle. So measure it so that it's perpendicular to the slope of the roof. And that's going to give you a better measurement. Okay, so we have a roof, walls, and a floor. I'm going to make these a little heavier now so you can see them. It'll just take a sec. But what I want you to take away from this is that the form of this is very traditional, very simple, and we're trying not to do anything overly complicated here. This is simple structure. Okay. Now, I had the roof extend over just a little bit because what we do is we, on the eave condition, we put in a rafter end or a roof eave, and this roof eave is going to be what they call plumb. That means it runs vertically. So I shot it past just by an inch or two for the trim. I'm calling it 6 inches for height. Okay, I'm going to complete making these lines a little bit more substantial so you can see them, and that's our goal for this portion of the video. There's some other things that we're going to need to see in the next installment, but this should give us a pretty good idea of what the form is, and now we know exactly where our drawing has to go in terms of completing the building section. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Floor, roof, and walls. Now, one last thing before we get things too carried away. We want the building to be anchored. We want the building to be set on something. And so we're going to place this on the ground. We're going to place it on the earth. So there's a term, it's a baseline or a ground line, but we're going to set that right now so that we can connect this building to the ground. And for right now, what I want you to do is measure from the finished floor, not the underside, but the top of the finished floor. I want you to measure 3 feet down and then mark it, and we'll put a horizontal line there. Okay? So, measuring from the top line here, not the bottom one, but the top line, down 3, and that's going to give me the ground line, and that line's going to be rather heavy. That's what keeps this thing from floating away. It is anchored to the earth. Okay. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and tighten up some of these lines because and make them a little bit more substantial. And for all intents and purposes, you can bring a line down on each side to connect the building to the base, to the ground line right here. Okay, so here's the ground. It's sitting on raised foundations. So, some houses, especially East Coast houses, have basements and so on. They sit on a raised foundation. Not so much in California. Some do, some don't. My house has part slab on grade and part raised foundation. It works both ways. So anyway, now we have a building form that's sitting on the ground. So that's what we've been trying to do. I wanted you to get the relationship initially with what we did with the floor plan to find our boundary walls, and then using our reference information to establish heights. We're going to go over much more of this in the next section. So just understand that's the pattern that we're using. So things that you need to be aware of as we close this thing is that I want you to start developing that designer's eye or that mind's eye view of what we're doing. You can see the plan below it, but now you can start to see what the elevation and the section are going to look like. So we're moving our mind's eye to a more vertical orientation, and that's where the section drawings are so helpful. So with that, we're going to spend some time in the next video section to complete the interior work here, and then placing some other elements on the outside as necessary. So with that, I'll say so long for now, and we'll see you in a few minutes as we continue on with this week's demonstration video. Thank you.